So I'll just go ahead and offer the prayer, and we'll go to that point. So, Heavenly Father, as we come before you at this time, I'd like to thank you for this day. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity we have to come together as a group and to discuss this case study and to expand our understanding of how we need to approach management and business decisions. Help us to learn the lessons we need to learn from this exercise. Help us to communicate effectively and efficiently, for we are grateful for this opportunity to go to school and to progress and expand our understandings. Father, know that we are grateful for thee and for all that thou hast done for us, and we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. Good, I'm glad you can hear me. So, I guess just the best way for us to do this is I'll ask a question, and there's not a lot of questions from this week, so I'll go ahead and ask a question, and then I'll give you time to respond, and I'll talk a little bit about my thoughts to the question as you're typing. So, minimize this. All right. So this case was interesting to me because I feel like it's something that's very relatable and that it occurs all the time. So the case follows Jamie Turner, that's his name. So the case follows Jamie Turner, who accepts this job as a marketing VP. He's like 32 years old. He's still relatively young, pretty young guy, and he's excited to work for this new company called MLI. And when he gets interviewed, Pat Cardulo, I guess is how you pronounce that name, his boss is really energetic and has given him all this freedom. He seems like a very relatable guy. And so as he gets into things with, as Turner gets into his gig, things don't go as planned. He has too much freedom. He can't, he's stressing about the decisions that he's making. He makes several decisions that his boss isn't happy with. His boss begins to get really concerned about, get really concerned about, what was it specifically? Forgetting. He's mad about, man, I'm totally spaced. Oh, the margin percentage, that's what it was. So he wants to make sure everybody has the right margins, that the margins are high, that the things are getting sold and sold well. So it was really, it's caused a lot of grief for Jamie Turner, who the case study follows. And as his relationship with this new VP starts to deteriorate, he also starts to have issues with another employee who's close with his boss, Julie Chin. So things start to kind of get really questionable for him. And then towards the end of of this case study, the CEO is coming in, and Jamie's excited to just kind of see what the CEO is going to say about what's been going on. He's also trying to find a way to approach his boss again to discuss some of the concerns and issues that they have. So that's just a brief synopsis of the case study. Heidi, I see you joined us. Thanks for showing up.
Yeah, hey.
Yeah. How's your week going?
It's been insane, but good.
Good. At least it's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to do that. All right. So we're just going to get started. We just finished the synopsis, obviously, as you heard. Adrian's just typing everything out. So we'll continue. I figured because of just Adrian, this is a short class, we'll just keep it a little shorter this week. I assume you don't have a problem with that.
I definitely don't.
All right. Okay. So I guess the first question is, uh, how did Turner get himself into this predicament, and what is going on for Cardullo? Is that how you pronounce that name?
I don't know.
I'm going to go with Cardullo. I might change it midway, but that's all right.
Okay.
Cardullo. All right.
Card. Okay. Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks, Adrian. All right. So, how did Turner get himself into this predicament? What are some thoughts?
Well, I think so one thing that I thought was really interesting, I promise this is relevant. Do you watch The Office by chance?
Yes.
Okay. So as I was reading the beginning of it, well, first of all, I kind of had to chuckle because Jamie's from Scranton. And
Yeah.
as it was kind of describing him and his career, it reminded me a lot of Jim. And there's one point in The Office where Jim's talking about, well, there's two times. Early on in the show, he's talking about what he does, and he's like, oh man, I'm boring myself just talking about it. And then later on, he's talking about how he could end up being there forever. And as he's saying it, like the realization hits him that like that could happen, and it kind of scares him. And Michael Scott tells him once that, you know, he hadn't planned on being there forever either. So how I felt like that was relevant, because as it was explaining him in the beginning, it just reminded me a lot of Jim in that, like, he didn't really plan on being there forever. It just was a job, you know, and he got kind of bored at his first job. He'd been there for 5 years and felt like it was no longer challenging, and, you know, really started to look for something more exciting. And I feel like that's kind of what Jim did too when he started looking at athlete and stuff like that. So I don't know. It probably was totally coincidental, but I was like, did they base this off The Office? um, but anyway, I think that there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting a challenge in your career. But I think that him getting bored and seeking out that challenge was the very beginning of where he maybe went wrong here, and you know, got him in this situation, because where he ended up moving to that next company, you know, was risky and it wasn't really a great move. And then, you know, then got him into this position. And from what I understood too, from the timeline that it gave, he was pretty young. He was 30, I think.
Yeah.
And so, like, to become a VP of sales and marketing at 30, again, I know people do it, but just wow, kind of. I think maybe too soon. I don't know. I know it's hard to say based on the little information that we were given, but anyway, so I think, you know, just boredom and being young, maybe not quite enough experience, got him in a little deep. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that. I love the offense references that you made. So, which is fantastic. I watched the show, understood every reference you made. So that's I love the athlete mention. But I did, and seeing this Jamie Turner as Jim makes me feel bad because I was kind of hard on him in my case study, by paper. I'm like, well, I wouldn't ever say that about Jim, but but the way I saw this was I felt I really strongly agree with what you kind of finished up with maybe he was a little bit too young, kind of getting on over his head. You know, he wanted all this freedom and all these things that he had mentioned before, like to kind of be the boss, be in charge, have this challenge. And they kind of jumped into a situation where, you know, one of the things is he is a little bit out of his league and he didn't need as much freedom. So, and to me, as I was kind of reading it, trying to think of it from his perspective, I felt that he kind of had like a slightly entitled attitude about some of the stuff. Because obviously some of the things going on with his boss his boss coming down on him, the way he kind of changed things from what the boss said, like, oh, well, you'll be in the running for in these promotions and, yada, yada, yada. And then as things started to deteriorate, I felt like he kind of got a little bit bitter, which I can understand the sentiment, but some of that bitterness I felt like carried over into some of his work. And so I think one of the things that kind of really got him in his predicament is that I think he kind of has a slightly entitled or possibly a bad attitude about what companies should necessarily offer him. And like up front, that's kind of how I see it. Like the first place wasn't challenging. He went to a startup trying to find a challenge, but things weren't super rosy over there, so he got scared and he decided to leave. Now he's at this new place where the boss kind of overpromised things, and now that the boss isn't following through with those promises, he's like, well, this is kind of ridiculous. I'm doing a great work here, which is true. He's a good worker, but because everything's not playing out the way he intended it, his situation just doesn't look very good. And if he's going to stay employed there, he needs to have a shift in paradigm about what he should expect from the company and what he's willing to give. Not that he should be willing to give everything and more, but he just needs to change his perception on what's going on there, was my first thought.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Cool. All right. Let me read what, because he felt he didn't have enough autonomy. Yep. He is now, I think overwhelmed is a great word to use there, Adrian. I agree with that completely. So what do we think is going on for Cardullo? What are your thoughts with the boss?
Something that stood out to me, I want to see if I can find it just super quick. I swear it's right here. Oh, right here. Turner sensed Cardullo saw people as either competent or incompetent and had great contempt and distrust for those in the latter category. And then in the paragraph above that, it says, he also expressed strong opinions about how to run a business. He believed firmly in management by objectives and stressed the importance of good communication, blah, blah, blah. So where this case study makes it very clear that he had very specific expectations. And my thoughts are Jamie maybe just didn't meet those expectations. He impressed in the interview, but then when it came down to the actual execution, he must have just fallen short somehow in the expectations. And kind of like we talked about in the last question, specifically like what Adrian said, if there was reluctance or hesitation or discontent on Jamie's part, likely Cardullo picked up on it.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, I agree too. I think you made a lot of good points. And I also think that Cardullo I think he has a lot of really solid management beliefs on how he should do things. Obviously, he doesn't always practice what he preaches, and maybe Turner's evaluation of him judging people by competent or incompetent, is accurate. Although that seems, it's probably harsh. So I also feel like he's probably under a lot of pressure because he's only worked. I think Turner's only worked there 3 to 5 months. He hasn't been there that long, and the first few months were okay. The first month or two, things were going well, and then in the last month or two, things have been kind of going sideways, haven't gone as well. And just from my experience, managers get under pressure. Whether that's the board's putting pressure on them, the CEO's putting pressure on them, so they kind of get overwhelmed and they start to behave, kind of a little irrationally or emotionally, which causes some issues in the workplace. And obviously, Pat Cardillo needs to own up to that, but I think Jamie just needs to understand that, like, bosses sometimes go through a phase where things are really stressful, really rough, and as that phase passes, then it should get better. Like, that was one of the things that I kind of took away. It sounds like he's just under a lot of pressure with the parent company having expectations for MLI and wanting them to add certain value to the bottom line of 888, I think was the name of the parent company, or Triple S or something like that. And so just those expectations that are being put on the boss, put on Pat, can make a big difference on how he handles these employees. So those that he works with, at least that's why.
Yes, I agree.
Adrian, you make some good points, though, about some of the poor choices that Cardillo is making. And I think that just kind of goes to show that I just don't think we know everything that's going on with him, and that although he's making poor choices, that there must be some type of I feel like there's must be some type of other pressure going on. So that's just my thought. Any other comments about this question?
I just want to say I really like Adrian's comments. Definitely a different direction than I was thinking, but I mean, obviously that's not important. Just really good points.
Yeah, I agree. So, like, looking back, Adrian, after what you posted, most of my case study that I wrote it trying to think from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that talked about how when you try to blame other people for your problems, that's just kind of like, playing the victim card is just kind of scapegoating it for you. You're never gonna you're not really gonna better your situation. So that was kind of one of the things I took away from this case study. Was my focus was on Turner trying to, like, accept the responsibility of the poor actions that he's made, maybe it's the way he mishandled certain things and his decisions, and kind of having to face up to the choices that he's made. And so I didn't spend a lot of time really digging super deep into Cardillo's choices, but you bring out a lot of really good things that I just didn't sit down and, like, reading that list of stuff, I think is great just to show that there is some major issues going on with Turner's boss. So thanks for pointing those out. The next question is, so what are the root problems in the case? So I'll start. I know I've had Heidi start last few questions. To me, I think that we've covered some of the other root causes already. I feel like attitude and perspective is a big root cause for the situation, both for Turner and for Pat. I also feel that like this poor communication is a huge factor here. That Pat has a tendency to overreact, get angry. Adrian mentioned, use inappropriate language, especially in front of people. So there's some really poor communications going on with him, as well as Turner's made some really questionable calls too. Like the way he handled that whole situation with Julie Chen, I thought was like why would you be that that aggressive? Like throws the email away in front of the lady. Like that was That wasn't even necessary. Like that's not helping anybody there, man. Like
Yeah.
just digging yourself a grave there. So I felt like all of that was just really uncalled for and poor communication. And I think until all the parties recognize their tendency to communicate poorly, then problems aren't going. It's going to be difficult to solve problems. I feel the best way for Pat to really, I mean not Pat, for Jamie Turner to help change things is to maybe try to apologize. Is definitely he needs to apologize to Julie. I think he should apologize to Julie, and I would also encourage him to apologize to Cardillo because they're going. I figured just a basic apology of, hey, listen, I know this is what you said, and I know that you're worried about margins. I'm sorry for not following through better with that, and just letting him know you're trying to get on, like that you're working to get on the same page and correct some of the things that he feels that Pat feels he's done wrong. Just trying to make amends for some of those little things I think can go a long way into strengthening that relationship. So those are my two things.
I agree with you. Yeah, I don't really, it's maybe surprising. Just don't have a whole lot to add. I definitely agree though that situation with the email was totally uncalled for.
Yeah.
Not a
Yeah. I agree with Adrian. It was just a little bit funny. Like watching it in the office would have been funny, but
yeah.
like oh moment. But yeah. I would never do it in real life or encourage anyone else to do it.
Yeah.
So, what other thoughts did you have, Heidi?
Yes. I don't know. I don't. Sorry. Can you say what the question was again?
So, what was the root problem? What are the root problems in the case? That's the main. So, I mentioned just change in perspective or attitude would go a long way for everybody involved, as well as improving communication. So, did you have something like? Did you think of something different than that?
And again, I mean, we don't really have a lot of information, which I don't know why I like to get hung up on these obscure things, but like, where he, was insistent on talking with his manager and his manager wasn't accepting his meeting invites. I feel like, there's definitely issue on both ends. For the manager to not accept his invites and not really give information as to why is, kind of silly and, maybe needed to be addressed. But also, potentially Jamie was maybe reading more into it than there was. I don't know. I mean, and maybe that's not even really a root problem, but just, I don't know, just seems like a lot of wasted energy, maybe wasted time and energy.
I do agree with that. When I read that, I remember thinking like, I could understand like if you're trying to get a sit down with the boss and he's not accepting your invitation, how that would be like, he doesn't even want to spend time with me. But what I felt that was interesting about that is that all of his invitations were to like, hey, let's go out and get a drink after work, or hey, let's go get lunch together off site. And that, like, just depending on the situation, the guy could have already had plans. Like, cause I think it was like 3 invitations. I was like, maybe he assumes it's like a hangout thing, like kind of like trying to butter him up. Maybe if it's more like an official, like, hey, I need to schedule a meeting with you during work hours where we can discuss something that's been bothering me or something I've been thinking about. I think that would be more like a more professional, as well as a more like attention grabbing, offer or invitation or just reaching out to him. I think that would mean more. It's like, okay, this is work related. He definitely needs to talk to me. That was just another thought I had. Like, dude, just asking him out to hang out at lunch might not portray the message that you want it to.
Yeah, because I mean, you basically said it, but you didn't say it. His invites were very casual, and his manager, without him expressing like why he wants that. His manager could have just assumed that, yeah, like you said, butter him up, or maybe, just that he wanted to go grab drinks, and there's no urgency in sending a more relaxed type invite.
Yeah, I agree. And Adrian just read your comment as well. And I agree with that. That Turner's role wasn't as well defined as he would have liked. I think initially he was excited by that, but then got in over his head and was like, I don't 100% know exactly what to do here. And Cardullo was not helpful in that regard at all. Especially, I think he was older. He's used to working with more experienced people at such a high position. So yeah, there's a lot of issues there.
I actually did just think of one other thing. I think something else that could have added to the issues was this idea that got put out before he even had the job, if I'm remembering correctly, that that they would be looking to replace the president within 2 years, and kind of implied to Jamie that he would be, in the running and a great fit. And I mean, that's a really heavy way to start off a new job. I mean, obviously he was excited and wanted it, but I mean, that's a lot of pressure. And again, particularly for somebody young and who doesn't have a ton of experience, that really could have just been a crushing weight for him.
Yeah, and I feel like this is something that does happen in the workplace just semi-regularly, that employers promise a lot of things to employees I think a lot of times with the intention of following through with that, but then things come up and stuff happens and they can't follow through with it. And so employees get really discouraged. I know that's happened to me several times. I know that's happened to my wife several times, where employees kind of start promising all these great things, these great benefits, or these promotions that never come, and just how discouraging that is. And that should definitely that should not have been brought up in the interview. Absolutely. I feel like that was you're promising a lot, trying to get this guy, selling him big, hoping that it works out well. He does what he promises. So that was a really interesting point. So the next question is, what did Pat and Jamie each initially bring to the situation at MLI that would seem to ensure success? Adrian looks like he's having some problems, so I'll go ahead and answer this one first. I think that Jamie's previous work experience and his MBA, as well as the success he had as he left those companies, that he was able to leave kind of with having accomplished some good stuff. He looked like a really good candidate, although he wasn't as experienced as I'm sure others that were applying, but he was probably young and hungry. And Pat probably was really excited about that. And hey, you bring in this young guy who's done some great things, has this great education. So, yeah. And then I think that Pat, had a lot of really good intentions, was communicating well, and things in that regard were going really well would have gone well for Turner if things had kind of played out the way both of them wanted it to. So I think that kind of helped get Turner excited. I think that got Pat in Turner's corner initially, but things obviously just did not work out that well. That way.
Yes. I think that, I mean, again, I don't really have a whole ton to add, but definitely Jamie having an MBA, really helped him. I think that his 5 years of experience at that first company also helped. So it did mention he was worried about looking like a job hopper, but I mean, he still spent a decent amount of time at that company. And then I'm having a hard time remembering details of this case. The second company, wasn't he at it for a year and a half?
I don't quite think so. I think he was only there like 8 or 9 months.
Oh, okay. Okay.
He wasn't on there that long.
But I
So
still don't think though that one job that you're not at for a super long time is going to completely destroy your credibility. So
you might have been right. I'm looking at it now.
Sorry?
So it was less than 18 months. So he hadn't even been there. At the most he'd been there was like 17 months, like less than a year and a half. He had done 2 job searches. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I don't know. And I mean, maybe this is taken from more of like a baby boomer Gen X point of view, but definitely like nowadays 18 months isn't terrible. So anyway, but still I've mentioned a few times that he didn't have a ton of experience, but I feel like he did have enough experience that it obviously helped him land the job, made him look competent. He had that MBA, which also helped him look competent and prepared and educated. So definitely think that those were good things. And in terms of Pat, he had like high expectations, but he obviously felt like Jamie had could meet those. Otherwise, he wouldn't have picked him. So I think he felt confident in his hire.
Yeah, I agree. So what do we think are Adrian keeps dropping in and out. So what do we think are the key choice points where either of them could have done things differently?
Choice points.
Yeah, so what things do you think, like what were the key points that they both could have made better decisions?
Well, like we talked about earlier with Jamie being like a little bit of a hothead. I mean, obviously that's not a great way to be in a professional environment. So I would say that's a big one. And then for Pat, the manager, I would say, I don't know, I'm torn on this one because if you're hiring a VP, you have to have high expectations. It's a VP, but I don't know, maybe he was a little unrealistic. I don't know. Or maybe he just didn't vet his candidates well enough. I don't know.
I think that's a really good point, the vetting of the candidates. To me, I think that Turner should have gotten better clarification of what his expectations were, to communicate it more clearly. And I would assume hey, he's the new guy. He doesn't want to always be asking for help, but he needs to understand the parameters of which he's responsible for, as well as the expectations, so he knows what is and what is not possible, so he can work to communicate effectively with Pat. I also think that I like the point that Jay made in the case study where he talked about that Pat needed to spend more time at MLI. And they had a good talk on the plane. And I think that shows that Pat knows things aren't going well and that he can do better and that there's things that he can changes that he can make. And so I think Pat just needs to kind of follow through with his management strategies and practices that he believes in. I think he needs to communicate a little bit more effectively with his employees, especially those that he's upset with, and to kind of clearly define just a few more parameters for Jamie just to help him be more successful, as well as be maybe a little bit more involved and interested in Jamie's success, just whether it's guidance or whether him having Jamie team up with someone else who can give him some assistance, someone who has more experience, just to kind of mentor him a little bit. So along all those things along that line, I think would be beneficial for Pat to do. So that was just some of my thoughts. All right, sweet. Adrian.
I think too that there's nothing wrong with I don't know, I feel like I've kind of ganged up on Jamie now, but I don't feel like there is anything wrong with people taking ownership and trying to make their job what they want it to be. So particularly where the role wasn't like clearly defined or laid out the way that he needed it to be, then I think that there's definitely a certain amount of responsibility on him to do that. But also when it comes to Pat, if like he's not going to be around a lot, then he needs to trust Jamie to be there to make the decisions that need to be made and then not come in and undermine him and undo things that he's done. So definitely like a bad mix of things going on in that situation right there.
Yeah, I agree. That was very well said.
Thank you.
So,
Come in.
Adrian, if you could just type in your response whenever you can.
They're in my purse. Downstairs on the chair.
So what we're going to do, I guess the last question I really have is how, if all, should Turner approach Cardullo at the end of the case? So what should, because that was kind of what it was leading up to. It's my rude family to get homemade cookies ready for me, so I can't be.
Oh, how rude.
Yeah, right? So no. So how do you think that Turner should approach Cardullo at the end of this case? That's the question. So how do you take the last one first? So I'll take this one. So my first thing is I think you should go in there and apologize, kind of come in there a little humble, just to show Pat that he's willing to learn and understand that he's made mistakes. I feel like Jamie would go in there and just make a lot of maybe not accusations, but just point out all the things that Pat's done wrong. And I feel like that would not go over well, nor would that, help foster the relationship that needs to exist between the two of them for both of them to be successful. So come in there and apologize for the mistakes he made, not effectively managing the sales manager, not meeting the margins goals with the with the product that he sold at cost, more or less, but things like that. And then I think he just needs to talk about where he's struggling. Like, hey, I'm having some issues. And one of the things that I learned from this class, one of the things, I think it was this class, they talk about just how to approach certain people when they need help is just to express, hey, like my goal here is I want to do a better job for you. Next is to but I'm afraid that by doing this, I'll either upset you or you'll question my ability to get the job done. And then kind of break down into okay, what some of the problems are, just to kind of help diffuse the situation. I think if he was to go in there and communicate in a more in an effective manner, such as that he should be able to communicate to Cardullo his concerns with his job, as well as the freedom that he has, his understanding of what Pat wants him to accomplish, as well as maybe some of the things that Pat's done that's left him feeling uneasy. I was trying to meet with you, you weren't, and I was afraid that this is what was going on. I've been wanting to talk to you just to make sure that we're on the same page, and that I want to make sure that I can perform to the best of my ability to support the company and all that. That was my thoughts.
So for me, sorry. I know I've already used this, or I told you guys about this situation in the past, so I'll just be super brief. But I told you guys about the time when I was having some issues with my partner, and so I took him into a conference room and was just kind of like, hey, we need to talk this out. And the way that I approached that was very much took ownership of what I was feeling and thinking and experiencing, and then tried to approach him in a more non-confrontational manner that was more what can I do to help you? Or, is there anything that do we have a problem? Do we need to talk this out, kind of thing? And I think, I don't know, maybe not effective in this situation. I'm not sure, but that's kind of my first inclination, is just where we kind of already talked about, like, maybe there really isn't that big of an issue here, or, maybe there is, but definitely going in with the accusations and things is never going to be effective. So trying to approach it from more of a, hey, like, this situation, like, this is how I'm perceiving it. What can we do to make sure that we're okay? Or, what can you say to me to make sure, to reassure me that everything is where it needs to be, kind of thing. I don't know. I don't feel like I'm explaining myself super.
No,
but
I get what you're saying, though. Like, the concept of clearing the air and of being very direct with what's going on, I think that is what's needed here. I think just that direct of, hey, these are the problems that we're having, and I feel like there's a rift between us here. What can we do to solve this? I think that is definitely a big part of how they should communicate. I also, Adrian, yes, I saw your comments that, empathetic listening, I think is a great addition to what you have said. I really like that empathetic listening, because that would get a better response. Another thing I thought of was, in that 7 Habits book, is when they talk about first seek to understand, then seek to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that's a great way, and I feel like maybe that was, and that is definitely kind of what you were saying, Heidi. Is just the way to clear the air on that is kind of just making sure that you're going to be listening to what hey, this is what I've kind of done, and I know that it's upset you or whatever, and then hearing what they have to say. I think that's great. Does anybody else have any other comments?
I do not.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments about anything that we've covered?
Nope.
Adrian, you good? If you're typing something, I want to give you time, so not responding, so I assume you're still typing. Oh, you're good. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for coming to the meeting. I know it was kind of a unique case study. It wasn't as clear as some of the other ones where I felt, but I feel like this is something that is a good chance we'll encounter something like this throughout in our careers, probably multiple times. So it was good to kind of hear what you guys had to say. As always, I learned a lot from you guys. I know next week we don't have a set meeting, but I believe that we are supposed to meet to some degree to cover our what do they call them, that project that we're doing, that online project we're doing. So not the online project, the personal development program, thing. So I guess that's what we're supposed to cover. It shouldn't take too long, but we can touch base, I guess, next week on that. Does that sound good?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, well, I'll close it off, and then I'll email this link just on the group page and email on the email. And all right, that's all I have. See you guys next week.
Cool. Thanks, Zach.
No problem.
Ian.
See you, Heidi. See you, Adrian.
Yeah.